All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I think we are up and running and good to go. So let me get everything loaded up on the layout and we will get started with today's jam stream session. All right, I'm gonna need to do a little bit of a sound check here. I was tinkering around with settings before we went live. That's why it took me a couple minutes today. So let me know if you can hear me all right, if I need to up anything on my mics. I think I'm coming in a little bit lower than normal, but hopefully it should still be audible. And I'm gonna put a real quick, simple beat under while we do an intro and we calibrate everything and get stuff set up. What's up, Crusher? Welcome to the stream. Hope you're doing well. Okay, a little quiet. Okay. How about now? I've got my dynamics up and my EQ up a little bit. I got to be careful with the EQ because it causes some distortion and fuzz. So I have that down a little bit, but I put my dynamics up. So hopefully this will come in a little bit cleaner and make sure I'm not peaking on my snares and sounds. Okay, not in the yellow. That should be good. Hey, Mysterious Phoenix is here. What's up, Mysterious Phoenix? How you doing today? Likewise, hope you're having a good Sunday. Say Sunday, right? All right, we'll keep tabs on audio. If I need to change anything, as always, let me know. So let me explain the setup today. Setup today is more or less the same for our jam streams. We have Synthesizer-kun over here. There we go. I'll make sure that's not coming in too loud. And for the first time on stream here, thanks to some creative setup, and I'll explain what I did to get this all to work. But on the other side of me here, make sure this is working. That's a little loud, a little soft. We have Casio-chan. So just to show that I'm not pulling any sort of weird illusions on you folks here, I have one and the other one. I have two synthesizers hooked up today, and I have not done that yet because I didn't think I'd be able to, but turns out, looking through my hardware and my numerous cables that I use for all sorts of different stuff, I found a headphone splitter, an audio jack splitter, and by hooking the auxiliary outs from Synthesizer-kun and the other one from Casio-chan, I can have both synthesizers hooked up at the same time. Now, when we actually get to BGM stuff a little bit later, I'm going to turn off my mic boost and whatnot because it still puts that distortion over the signal. And the line out isn't perfect. I have to be a little bit careful with how I calibrate stuff when I'm recording because it still will put a little bit of distortion if it's really loud. Hopefully the next few releases for BGM stuff won't have that, but I'll be listening carefully to see. But I don't know if I can do anything about that if it's just from the auxiliary cables. But when we actually get to BGM stuff, we'll be able to use both sets of instrument sets, to put stuff together, which should be fun. Maybe I'll take a picture one day and post it on Twitter of what my setup looks like. It's a nightmare. Because of how small my desk is, I'm essentially boxed in by synthesizers now. But Casio-chan, small enough that I can set the whole synth up on my L desk directly to my right, but Synthesizer-kun is massive, so I have to have that one up on these boxes on top of some stools, but it's right here at like elbow height for me, so I can actually hit stuff without having to look down too far. So I'm going to turn the Casio off. That one has like an auto timeout mode for some reason, and it just turns off, so I'm just going to just switch it off for now, and then when we get to BGM, we'll turn it back on. So that would be an interesting thing to mess around with today. We'll have a lot of options at our disposal. I'm just going to need to be real careful with my mic boost as we're recording stuff, and making sure I'm not putting like a layer of fuzz over everything with the boosts. So we'll figure that out when we get to BGM, but that should be fun. What else are we going to work on? So as usual, we'll start with some basic warm-ups and run through some simple freestyle beats for a stretch to get the blood flowing and get everything ready like we usually do. And then for sound theory discussion, I think I'll probably do some status checks on things that I'm working on. I didn't really prepare anything in advance today, so if people have questions on stuff, by all means, feel free to ask or stop me when I'm working on things. But I don't imagine we'll spend a ton of time on sound theory today. It's mostly just a status check on developing sounds and kind of building off of what we talked about in the last jam stream. And then from there, maybe we will do some more in-depth freestyle practice and start putting things together. And I haven't done a lot of that on the most recent couple streams, so I'd like to actually run through some applications of stuff, not just talk about it. And then we'll see how long that takes, and then the rest of the time will be devoted to brainstorming ideas for BGM tracks with our two synthesizer friends here. Oh, we'll go ahead and get started. Let me kill this. I'm going to run through some warm-up freestyles. And again, let me know if I need to fix anything with audio. It sounds like we're all right, but as stuff starts going, if I need to tweak anything with the settings, let me know, and I'll try and adjust it. So let's go ahead and get started. Hey, Eric's here. What's up, Eric? How are you doing today? Welcome to the jam stream. We're just running through some simple warm-ups, get the blood flowing, make sure there's proper circulation to all of my face parts. And also doing a sound check. Eric says, going fishing, Destiny, Titan stuff. I thought you meant you were going, like, real world fishing for a sec. But I remember you telling me about the fishing mini games, so I got you. May all of your catches be big ones. All right, I think we're still doing all right sound level wise. Let me try and tweak something in OBS real quick. Maybe that's why I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end. One sec. Let's drop that just a hair. Let's see if that makes a bit of a difference. It seems like my video game streaming audio settings are very different from my jam stream settings. So every time I tweak one, I've got to remember to tweak it and change it back so it's not screwy. I'm used to having a pretty decent amount of boost on the audio levels in OBS just because I have a mic that needs a bit more of a push. But on my loop station, all of the boosts come from the instrument itself. So I need to just remember to balance it out. So yeah, let me know if you hear anything weird or if you hear it hissing or staticking. Eric says, I only need one from a planet and have like 50 baits. I hope it appears. Well, maybe I can give you streamer luck. I'll do my best to try and transfer my somewhat spotty luck to you as you're fishing. All right, so let's change the caption. I need to remember to do that. And we'll kind of lump sound theory and practice into one kind of catch-all category as we discuss stuff here. And then we'll probably just leave it like that until we switch over to BGM, and I need to remember to change it. And so in thinking about what I've been practicing over the last couple weeks or so since we last talked, there is the technicality stuff that we'll talk about when we get there. But outside of that, a lot of the drills and practice stuff that I've been working on have been kind of just trying to push through on techniques that I know. I haven't picked up anything new recently, really. But like we've talked about on previous streams here, trying to continue to develop sounds is something in beatboxing that is always present. You're always trying to evolve and refine and build on the stuff you learn, and there's really no skill cap. Maybe some of the basic sounds that people learn when they're first starting out, like your kicks, hats, stuff like that, you're probably not going to evolve them too much because they're relatively simple. But anything that requires a bit of learning or technique to, one, figure out, and then to master, over time, those sounds, if you practice them and continue to drill them, they'll continue to improve. And so there's not really a case of, intermediate to advanced sounds in beatboxing where you would learn it and say, okay, I know it good enough, I never need to practice it to get better. It's not really true at all. You can always find ways to refine and push stuff forward, which is what I've been trying to do over the last few months or so, because for me, learning new techniques is always good, but I don't want to try and learn too much, because then I'll just not be good at any one thing. I'd rather try and focus on improving the stuff that I have, and then when I feel like I am hitting a plateau and the progress is slowing down, then maybe look at switching and learning something new to kind of expand the arsenal of techniques and sounds. And aside from picking up inward bass last year, I don't think I really want to try and fit another advanced technique into what I'm trying to learn. Eventually, I'll have to devote more time to click rolls and start working that in more, but there's a lot of techniques. I do want to learn the post snare at some point. That one is very difficult. But 4 things that I'm actively working on, and I was kind of messing around with this a little bit earlier in the week, just off content, and thinking about basses. We'll talk about basses a little bit first, and then we'll do the technicality part after. But thinking about basses and how, going from the throat bass, kind of like the intro to the vocalized and voice-based sounds for bass tones and whatnot, and then moving from that to vibration bass and then vocalized chest. Those 3 I consider part of the same kind of skill tree. What I've been doing is kind of circling back and trying to focus in on each of those and see how they've kind of changed and how I want to sort of push them, instead of just leaving them the way they are, not trying to tweak anything with those sounds. So for throat bass, the kind of higher, tighter, distorted throat bass using your voice, what I thought about was I treat throat bass kind of like a mid-range series of sounds, if you want to think of it like an octaving or music scale. I don't really go high, and this is something I've talked a little bit about before. I tend to stick from maybe around like dropping down to maybe like and that's several steps. I don't know what notes, but several steps worth of range for that sound. But I don't really go much higher, and if I go lower, then I switch to vibration bass to drop down in the lower octaves, and you get the becoming a. And we'll talk a bit about vibration bass too as part of this discussion. But what I was thinking about is building endurance for the higher range of throat bass, which you hear in a lot of routines. People do that a lot. There's some super talented people like Codfish and Gene out in the pro scene that can do a lot of really interesting melodic things with that bass, pushing it up higher instead of just going for the really heavy low end, drop and aggressive dubstep type stuff. And so I thought I'd spend some time kind of figuring out where my upper range lies with throat bass, because that's not really something I've thought a lot about, but I could tell that it puts a different type of strain on my voice when I'm doing it versus the range I'm sort of comfortable in. I could do that all day and not really notice, but as soon as I start trying to stay in the higher range, I could feel it straining my voice more. So I think it'll make sense to kind of work into practice a higher range push and see. I'm not going to try and go like super, super high in octaving, because I can't see too much use for that in patterns and routines. But having that range, just like a singer's range, I think would be pretty handy to build and refine. So this is kind of a test I'll run through in real time on stream here, since I didn't really do it much off content. It's just an idea I had. If we start with the kind of comfortable pitch for throat bass and just ramp it up, like you're just going upwards, singing upwards in notes, or going upwards on a scale, or even on a synthesizer, just going upwards. Let's see where that upper range starts to break apart, and then kind of make a mental note for future reference. And that'll be kind of like where we're working with as far as pushing the range of throat bass upwards into the higher range instead of lower. So starting like right in the middle, and I'm doing some real simple closed loop filter on this, because it's my favorite way to do the sound, but just for the sake of the exercise here, I'll just do the same thing. If we push it upwards a few steps and go, still holds together. I don't hear the pitch breaking up, and it's not really wavering, up and down, but I could feel it a little bit on my throat. My throat's not used to staying up there that high. And so if we go, that's maybe one step up from that, still seems to hold and starts to feel a little shaky for me. I don't know if it comes across on the mic quite as audibly, but that's probably starting to push out of the comfort range for the high end that I normally do. So if we take the I think that's the limit, because I could feel it starting to kind of crack and get a little bit of unwanted distortion on it, and that is definitely something I could feel on my vocal cords when I'm going that high. So if we think about where that places on the, I'm not going to try and match it up with pitch. That'll take too long because I don't know notation. But the, yeah, even half a step down or so from that is easier to do, and it feels less strain. And so that's kind of going to be our benchmark. And when I practice, I'll probably try and do some high to low drills to maybe go from like the bottom range of throat bass to the upper end. I'll illustrate that in a sec. Just to practice, one, changing high to lows, because that's really good practice in general to control your voice and the sound generation. But also to try and, one, get that upper end to be cleaner, and then just like you practice singing higher in regular vocal work, trying to push that maybe even one step above that, might be shaky, and then try and build the range that way. So eventually we've added a few more steps higher on the range for throat bass, and then that's just another part of the tool set that's been evolved. So when I say high to low drills, I mean starting at the low end and then jumping up high and then going back and forth, so your voice gets used to changing from that dynamic low to high. And so the way I would probably do that would be something like, if you want to put it into an actual beat to make it more practical, then you just throw together some sounds around that, and then you might do something like, in fact, I can go nasal with it so I can make it easier to do snares. And doing that basically is directing the sound through my nose and controlling it that way instead of out of my mouth, which makes it easier to layer things on top when it comes to the non-voiced sounds. If I do a non kind of breath controlled low snare, it would probably sound a little bit less choppy and smooth. Layering is something we'll probably talk about in the future, but that's something I've been trying to practice a lot and get better at, because it's really handy to know how to do all the different sounds in beatboxing, in a vacuum, but putting them together and then having them be a cohesive series of sounds, notes, and whatnot is what really shows off the potential of, the musical styles. And overall, beatboxing is like an art form. You could walk up to an average Joe on the street and, just say, oh, I can do a beat. It's like, and they might go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. I don't normally see people that can do that. But if you walk up to someone and you're like, oh, yeah, I know how to beatbox and I can, put a song together real quick, and maybe a different style of song, but she might do something like, And you kind of show off a more complete sound with, like a bass or a melody combined with the beats, and you have it layered seamlessly. It's gonna seem a lot more impactful and impressive. I don't want this to sound like you would learn it purely for the sake of showing off. But for someone who doesn't know beatboxing and complexity, they're probably going to be more impressed by the fact that you're doing all these sounds in a kind of single set and presenting it like an actual song than if you just went up and busted out some really fast technical patterns, which has no real context for someone who doesn't know beatboxing. And so layering is something we'll probably talk about in the future. It's something I've been working on trying to get better at. But for the sake of the discussion today, when it comes to the basses and bass register, I think focusing on jumping from throat bass specifically, mid-range in the comfort zone to out of the comfort zone, and then back down, and then going back and forth is going to be a good way to try and push that range. And we'll check on the status of how that's been working out in future jam streams, and hopefully we'll see a progression, right? The goal is to see that the sound is evolving in some way, and in this case it's going to be being able to hit the higher end and stay there, and then be able to push higher than that. Lower end I'm not as concerned about. We'll talk about vibration bass next, and that really covers more of the low end for the bass tones and what I'm comfortable operating in. And so it's going to kind of be an ongoing thing. Let me grab a drink here. All right. So talking a bit about how throat bass covers your mid upper range on the distortion for the voiced bass techniques. So now we go the opposite direction. We go lower. And just like we've talked about on previous streams, where the technique changes from a more tight controlled upper part of your vocal cords for like the mid and upper range of throat bass, when you're dropping it lower and pushing that down, you open up your throat and your vocal cords to get more of a resonance, and that allows you to drop that pitch lower, and it gets a deeper and kind of more of a resonant and rattling-ish sound depending on how you're doing it. But that, from what I've gathered, is how most people handle the throat type basses going lower without it being internal or inwards or a vocalized chest bass. So for vibration bass, that cutoff for me goes from about and you could tell it switches because it starts to reverberate a little bit more, and I feel like it's easier for me to control because I've done so much practice just trying to get low sounds from that particular technique. And that's my favorite of the voiced vocalized basses is vibration. It's the one I practice the most, and the one I want to get really consistent and good with because it's got a lot of really interesting potential in how you apply it. And so if we think of the same exercise of going as low as possible with vibration bass, for me, and I didn't test this, I was focusing on the high end, so I guess we're going to find out here. For me, vibration bass, the lowest it goes is about and any lower than that, I have to go vocalized chest, and even then it drops down maybe like a one or half step. It doesn't get much lower. And so I'd be kind of curious to see if I was doing the same practice of focusing on the absolute low end, if I keep pushing it, if I'll be able to get a more kind of clean and defined sound, or if I can actually drop lower. I don't think I can get much lower because of just my voice. But if we were to take the same example and go from like the starter vibration bass, like, and then drop to the bottom and go back and forth, the same exercise as the high to low or low to high, it would go. And it's not a big jump. It's maybe 2 steps-ish. But that is the difference in as you drop lower. And I think it's got kind of a more of a ceiling to it because, the human voice only goes so low without getting into subharmonics and a bunch of really, really kind of complex stuff. But in just trying to push that vibration lower, I guess I'll have to experiment with it and see, because I would love to be able to get a consistent, like absolutely like bottom end type of vibration bass on par with some of the pros out there. Some folks out there have some like nasty vibration bass. I think of folks like Remix is definitely one of them, and a whole bunch of people in the scene that have such control over that kind of low end sound that when they do it changes distortion wise too, and a lot of people do it in different ways, and so we'll have to see. And I'll have to play around with the kind of type of drills that I think makes sense for something like that. Maybe it's sustained note drills where you're just doing long notes instead of short, choppy movements. So maybe something like I don't know. I got to think about that. What makes the most sense for that one? But I'm hoping to kind of refine and tweak that one some more, since again it's the one I use a lot, and you'll hear it in a lot of the practice and drills because it's kind of my default for lower end bass distortion. But we'll see. Vocalized chest bass I haven't really experimented with a ton. Just practicing on getting the actual distortion and the way the sound comes out to just be cleaner. I haven't really been pushing that one too much lower. Vocalized chest bass is the one that sounds like whoa, 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 whoa. And that one does go lower than the vibration bass. I think just in the nature of the fact that you're taking the growl, the chest bass, and combining it with a sung note, and you're not pushing on your vocal cords really at all. And so if you're combining those two, you can get it lower without as much effort. And so lowest end vocalized chest bass would be I had to try for a second on that one. Yeah. And I don't know if I could get it much lower than that. Any lower than that, and I think I would be unable to make a voiced sound. We'd have to go inward bass if we wanted to get lower than that. And so if anything, pushing vibration to kind of be on the same low end potential as vocalized chest might be a good short-term goal. We'll have to see. I'm not exactly sure what I want to do with both of those combined, but maybe I can use one to kind of improve the other, and that'll help push the sound forward. All right, so before we get out of sound theory discussion and do some drills and practicing, I did want to talk about updates to the technicality stuff I've been working on. And I've been drilling this a lot, and this has been the thing I've been working on the most lately because I want to really kind of polish and get this technique down so I can use it more readily and have it at my disposal. And that's the Poto Poto sound set we talked about before, POTO. And to recap real quickly, because it's been a couple of weeks since I talked about this, the Poto Poto is a combination of pops and tongue clicks. And so the PO, the po part is the pop. Not to be confused with the tennis ball can pop, which is lower and hollow. Which sounds like lower, bit more resonance and hollowed out by opening your throat. This is just a simple, just like the cat opening and closing its mouth meme. Same sound. And it combines that with a tongue click, a further back on the roof of the mouth tongue click. So instead of like a, which is the back of the tongue, this is using the tip of the tongue right behind the palate. And so instead of a, you're getting a, and shaping the mouth into an O keeps from just being a regular kind of sharp noise. Like without it sounds like, you shape your lips into an O and you get a, it's got a bit more of a resonance to it, and by opening and closing your mouth, you can change its pitch, which it makes it really handy. So it goes from to, and I think it's faster than a regular place tongue click, which you can't really change the pitch on that too much. I guess you can a little. You can go like, but that's a bit more forceful and strong, and it's difficult to do that really quickly. Like you do it in rapid succession with a standard tongue click, and mine goes maybe, so that 16th notes. But for the tip of the tongue click that I'm doing here for this particular pattern, though, I can do that much faster because it doesn't require as much force from the tongue muscles. And you combine that with the ability to change its pitch easily just by changing mouth position. You can do runs with it instead of just doing, by changing pitch, you can do what I was illustrating a second ago, where you're going, very versatile and really something I neglected for years. I never really focused on it. Wasn't part of my standard tool set. But in kind of putting together the practice stuff for the poto poto, that you're combining them with the, and putting that into a technicality combo and stringing it as part of a sound set instead of just 1 offs or 2 offs or 3 offs or whatnot. And so the sound in its whole set, if you're doing POTO, POTO, sounds like, pretty simple. And what I've been practicing is doing that faster and then stringing it together with a transitionary technical sound to get a speed chain, which is what we kind of kicked off and introduced last week. And again, I've been trying to practice this a lot to kind of learn and get faster with it so I could start putting it into beats. So taking the combination of pops and clicks, and again, going slow though. As you practice it and get familiar with the muscle memory and the positioning, and your tongue gets more strength to it, like this is a different muscle group, I think, for the tongue on the clicks than like a clop, like a hollow clop. I'm practicing that too, but we won't get into that today. I'll stick with just the poto poto. And so again, doing the 4 sounds in slow succession, and the transitionary link I was talking about, I'll be using an F hat, an FT hat. So the whole thing slowly sounds like, it's P-O-T-O-F, P-O-T-O-F, P-O-T-O-F. P-O-T-O-F, so 1 repetition instead of 4. Make sure I'm saying that correctly. Yeah. It's 2 repetitions, an F that links it, and then it repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. And so doing that faster, it starts to chain together and become more fluid, and that's when it starts becoming an actually functional technicality combo. So if we do that in real time, even just doing without the transitions, in one repetition, sorry, I'm playing around with how I've been practicing it, trying to explain it in words. And I think this is probably going to be difficult to hear loudly because it's not a loud sound right now. I'm working on trying to get it louder. But just the POTO without any transition, just doing that back to back, I could tell it's gotten faster than when I first started doing this maybe a month ago. So it's definitely progressed, but I want to keep pushing it more to get faster with it, because that's the whole point of technicality, is to be consistent with it so you can use it to fill in parts of beats, and when you want speed, you can slot it in as a speed pattern. It doesn't have to be, but that's the way a lot of people use it. And so taking them, that's kind of how I've been drilling it, I guess. Kind of mixing up the POTOs and putting an F here or there, not necessarily in the same place, but just trying to keep a consistent chain for as long as possible while focusing on getting the sound to come out and then keeping it going until, I have to stop and reset. And for such a simple combination of sounds, it's difficult to do quickly. I think anyone who's listening to this stream is capable of doing the individual sounds in a vacuum. Everyone's probably done that at some point in their life for whatever reason. The mouth position might be something that you might not readily do in any given day, but just a light click, again, I think that's something most people can do if they just try. So taking these two and creating them, even doing just the POTO back to back and going kind of like a ping pong noise is what it sounds like to me. Doing that in a combo, almost like a metronome, and do it to a metronome is even better because it'll help you keep time. Doing that back and forth, and then slowly trying to get it faster and faster, like going faster volleys in ping pong or table tennis. Faster is a good practice, and that's what I've been doing. So if we think about it, you're taking them, and this is just PO and then TO with no pitch changes on the TO, on the click. You could tell it slowly gets faster, and then if you want to kind of change the way the sound, the way I first kind of figured out that this was a potential for a technicality combo, will be making the pop sound a little bit sharper and then shortening the click a little, and it sounds like, that's more about mouth open instead of with the ooh sound. So doing that, you do that as just general speed practice too. But going back to our example, that's what I've been practicing and really trying to drill a lot. I'm hoping to keep pushing the sound so that the click and the pop get louder too, because it's not the loudest technicality set that I have. And so how would we put it all into a beat? I could talk about the technique all day long, but until you slot it into a beat, then it doesn't really mean much as far as knowing the technique. So we could try and take a real simple kind of hip-hopish type beat and then think about how we would slot in the POTO as part of just a filler. Again, a filled section of the rhythm that's giving it more flavor and more kind of dynamicness to it. So maybe we do something like I did a couple different permutations of the POTO. I did a slow one, which just in between, which finishes off with the PF because that's the start of the next measure. But then I was trying to double time it and make it faster, just to cram in more notes in that section, and that's how we're getting them. If you change it like a dubstep rhythm, slow it down, but give more space to put the rhythm and stretch out that technicality with more than one loop. That's how you're getting a. And so I mixed up with very similar in sound, but if you listen closely, you could tell that the click sounds a little bit different. It's a instead of a sharper, instead of more of an echoey resonant sound. And I'm sure that'll be something I work into the technicality chain too, like maybe going and then doing it even faster in a run like that. So instead of it just being it's got the sharp and the resonant mixed in, and that's how you're getting that. And so pop and click combination technicality patterns, again, something I just never did. I didn't even think about practicing it until I saw B-Art do this real quick beat on Maddox's podcast. And it was crazy. I thought, wow, that sounds so simple, but it's really impressive to listen to. And so that's when I went back and started messing around with the different components of the pops and clicks. And I thought, wow, that's so easy to practice. I really have no reason not to learn it and then refine that. So if nothing else, in the next 6 months, being able to evolve some really handy pop and click patterns for technicality is going to be brand new. It's going to be something that I've never really done, and we'll work it into all of the beats, and hopefully you folks will start seeing it more readily. Because I've been working on the TKKs. I drill that a lot too, especially if I'm driving somewhere and I don't have to have my brain turned all the way on. But the is getting to be about where I want it, so I just need to keep pushing it a little bit further. And so having the pops and clicks is something else to practice will give me more to kind of develop as the progression plateau kind of flattens out for the TKKs. Because I think being able to loop them and do the TKKs quickly, I'm getting much better at. I'm still want to keep, again, refining it and evolving the sound, but the if we were to look back a year, that is much better controlled now than it was a year ago. And that's just practice and drilling. Nothing but drilling. If anything, what I need to work on with the TKKs is putting it into beats more, because it's just not my brain's default go-to when it comes to slotting in sounds I know for technicality. I default to like the TKP, the first set that I used, and things with the zip. But trying to work in more of the TKK now that I can do it is something I'm going to work on too. So that's another part of the practice that's going to be really important. Because again, you can sit there and be able to do like a pattern, but that's not anything. It's just a bunch of noise. So you have to be able to put it into a routine and pattern and structure it so that it's part of a song. Because you could do techniques in a vacuum, but they don't mean anything unless you apply them. So I've been trying to figure out, okay, what are some good ways to do these TKK chains the same way we just illustrated with the POTO. And so you might have something like that's not a good example in the last measure, but slotting it in when you have control over the sound set means you just have to adapt the rhythm and the number of quote unquote notes in the chain to flow into the next part of the beat that you're constructing. And so that's what I've been kind of focusing on with the TKK. I can do it and I'll keep drilling it, but I want to be able to start putting into things so you hear it and hear it integrated smoothly instead of, shoehorned and just tacked on. Because if you do that, it's really obvious when someone has just kind of plugged stuff in there for the sake of just throwing it in there. It's got to mesh seamlessly. And you might see some examples of that coming up soon with some stuff I'm working on. So I would say just stay tuned and see how that kind of evolves and becomes part of the general Beatbox toolset. Now, the true culmination of learning all this stuff that I talk about and practicing is going to be doing like one big Frankenstein's monster fusion of all of the different technicality chains that I have. You might go like TKP, TKK, POTO, or something like that. That would be wild. I'd like to get there eventually, but if we think about that, oh wow, that's such a different mouth position. Yeah, I don't even know if that would fit together, just because that is wildly different from the TKK and the TKP. TKK and TKP are kind of cousins in the way they're done. They're close together and they string pretty seamlessly. That is an entirely different part of your mouth with your lips. The TKP uses very little lips at all just to do the percussive parts, but the POTO, it's all lips for the PO, and the TO is just tongue. So I don't know how you would go from to maybe go TKPO or TKPO. I don't know. That feels really weird. That's not an intuitive progression of techniques. So maybe I'll have to figure out something creative with that one, and we'll see. That would be like a mastery level combination of techniques if I was able to figure that out. But yeah, we'll see. Again, pushing and trying to get better with them. POTO, that'll be the main topic of discussion when it comes to technicality for a bit. And I can tell it's progressing because it's getting easier to do a lot of those fast speed combinations with it, but still a lot more I want to do and want to get better with it. So we'll check back in with that one in future streams and see how it's progressed. All right. I think we can go ahead and move on to BGM creation. We kind of worked in drills and practice stuff with the explanation of what I was talking about, without me just sitting here doing nothing but pops and clicks into the mic for 10 minutes straight. So let me change the caption and we'll get everything loaded here and see what we can come up with for some BGM beats. And for this, let me see if I can slide my second synth up just a bit. Okay. I think that's coming in fine. Hey, Lava King's here. Lava King redeemed a hydrate. All right. I'm finishing up my smoothie from lunch, so you hear me drinking. Welcome to the stream, Lava King. Hope your Sunday is going well. We are getting ready to brainstorm some ideas for BGM tracks. And this will be the remainder of our stream time today, so we'll see what we can kind of create. And I have both, actually, I mentioned this at the beginning, so you might not know what I'm talking about. I've got both of my synthesizers hooked up today through the joy of audio splitting cables. We have Synthesizer-kun, and on the other side of me here is Casio-chan. And so we'll be able to use both of the instruments and see what kind of stuff we come up with today. Lava King says, saw Spider-Verse, got Dairy Queen for dinner, I'm okay. Nice. I know Crusher was telling me about Spider-Verse earlier, and I haven't seen the first one, but I'll need to see the second one too at some point. I've heard good things. Lava King says, been super sick for the past 5 days. Yeah, I saw you mentioned that in the Discord. I hope you feel better, man. Just take it easy and give your body time to recuperate so you can get back on your feet. All right. Let's see. I'd have to go back into the loop file history and see what kind of tracks we did before. I think on the last stream we did a kind of electronic, like a techno-ish type beat from what I vaguely remember. So let's see if we can come up with something different for this one. Maybe we go smooth and kind of more of like a chill, ambient, down-tempo-ish type of sound. Similar in vein to the upcoming release for the Neon Night Lounge, which for folks that are listening, this is going to be something, when I confirm, it'll be up on Twitter either today or tomorrow. Next week is going to be the launch party for the 2 BGM albums that I've been talking about for the last 4 months. I need to get confirmations, but it's going to be Thursday the 8th, most likely. Around the same time I normally stream. I have to coordinate with Banani and Pwups because they're going to be joining me on stream to talk about the artwork that they made for the project. And so just like we did for the Lost Kingdom, the one that Wazzy did the animation for, the way it'll work on stream is I'll be showing the compilation video I've edited that has all of the BGM tracks, and included in the video are the art pieces that Banani and Pwups drew for the project. And we'll watch them together on stream, and after each song we'll talk a little bit about the song and the art. And so that's going to be Thursday, and I'll probably mention it throughout the week too, just so people know. But I haven't locked in a time yet. It's going to be sometime in the evening Thursday, I think, unless something changes. I got to coordinate two people's schedules and make sure everyone is ready to go. Lava King says, the sample I just heard sounded like something I would call Jazz Vampire, just doing runs on the upper end of the keyboard. I think we can go for a kind of smooth and chill type of sound. But yeah, I just wanted to mention the next week is going to be a big week because we'll be officially launching the BGM albums. I'm really pleased with how everything turned out, and I think you folks will like them a lot. So stay tuned, but it's most likely going to be Thursday evening and should be a party. All right. So taking Lava King's idea and running with it, what if we tried to work in a kind of smooth and, again, down-tempo-ish song, but we add some kind of like darker overtones instead of kind of something that was, upbeat but still smooth? What if we kind of flip the mood in reverse or inverse and make it kind of like a trip-hop-ish smooth, maybe more of a darkerish type sound? We might be able to incorporate something like organs or something else that'll give it maybe more of like a kind of gothic sound, and kind of try something different when it comes to the more smooth stuff. I don't think I've done something like that, and if it sounds good, maybe we can use it for the upcoming Halloween release in the fall. If we have time at the end of the stream today, I will show you guys some of the stuff that I've been working on this week. This week I wrote several tracks for the Halloween BGM pack that's going to be due out at the end of October. And that one is going to be fun. I need to figure out what I'm doing for the art on that particular project. I might do icons for each track like I did last year, but I think I want to hire someone to do the main album art. So I'll have to figure that out soon. But I recorded on the loop here off stream several tracks that I want to use for that Halloween pack. So maybe I'll get to show you guys one of them near the end. It's going to be interesting. But let's establish a rhythm first. And so I think the best way to do this, I'm going to have to turn my boost on and off, which is going to be kind of annoying. But if I do it that way, then it'll keep it from getting really distorted when I'm actually recording stuff. Maybe if I well, let me mess with my dynamics for a sec here. About that. Nah, it still gets a little bit of fuzz when I talk. How about now? A little bit subtle. It's okay if there's distortion when I talk because I'm not actively recording things, but I'll have to turn all this off when I'm actively recording stuff from the loop. So I'll do my best to kind of switch everything back on so I can talk. But what I'm going to do first is establish a rhythm, and we'll listen to it, see how it sort of plays, and then we'll start adding in the other components of the track. We'll go bass line and start adding in some highs and mids and some other melodies and stuff. So again, running with the idea of like a darker, like vampire jazz, like Lava King saying. Let's see what we can come up with. All right, let me turn everything back on for a sec. Crusher says, "Hey, sorry, I was having my good day ruined. I'm back now." Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Crusher. I hope it works out, and at least while you're here, you can just chill out and vibe. I like the way that beat's laid out. The like third kick was off by like a half beat, and so I gotta fix it. But I'm gonna keep the same tempo and the same beat style. I just need to re-record that. I just figured I should explain why I'm gonna redo it in a sec. But again, vampire jazz. Let's see what we can do. So let me turn my boost back off, and we'll try that again. That'll work better. Crusher asks, how are you recording the drums? Do you have a set or is it on your keyboard? It is using the percussion sound set on the synthesizer. This is Synthesizer-kun right here. The drum instruments on Casio-chan are not as robust, so I probably won't be using those as a sole basis for creating a beat. But when I do the recording for the loop, I'm basically hitting the keys on the keyboard to correspond to the different parts of the drum, and then I just capture it and start layering more things on top. Yeah, not as impressed with the percussion set on the Casio. The big synthesizer, the Yamaha, it has several different drum kits on it, and a lot of them actually, like 10 of them. And so each one has its own set of percussion instruments. So when I put a beat together in a rhythm, I'll usually pick and choose sounds from different ones and jump around. So it's not just the rock set or the jazz set. I'll use a little bit from everything and kind of layer it all into one beat to get what you guys are hearing here. Okay. So I think we've got a good bass rhythm. Now we want to come up with a bass line that's going to be, again, a good combination of lows, but again, we're going for kind of a more dark jazzy-ish type of theme. So I'm going to mess around with maybe some bass, guitar to bass strings, or maybe some organ or keytone based sounds to get like a kind of low resonant sound, and then maybe like a downwards progression of notes. And then we'll kind of see. I'm thinking strings, which is what Crusher's saying about a violin. So for the high and mid end melodies, I think maybe some strings or more pronounced pipe organs would be a good kind of mix. So keep all that stuff in mind as we start layering things together. So we're going to go low end, construct that, high end, and start piecing together things. And we'll see how it evolves. So I will fill around the bass line, and then if I have a ready idea, I will do the mids, and then I'll turn my boost back on, and then we'll talk about each step along the way. So I wanted to do this more like a step-by-step discussion instead of I bang out a whole track and then talk about it at the end. So just like Lava King and Crusher have been tossing out suggestions for musical instruments and other type stuff, keep them coming because we want to kind of build this collaboratively. So let's see. Let me figure out an instrument to use for a bass line, and then we'll go from there. All right. Let's turn my stuff back on. Let's talk about this a little. So what I did was I took a low-end sequence of notes and then jumped up a little bit and then came down in the note progression. Very simple, nothing really that complicated. But I started with a vibraphone? Yeah, like a vibraphone type sound. And then I did the progression, and then I did the same thing with a synth bass, and then I did the same thing again with strings. So it's the same sequence of notes. I did the synth bass 1 octave up from the other one. The strings and the vibraphone using the guitar to bass, they're all done in the same notes. Then I went 1 up on the synth bass. And so we got kind of a smooth, but to me it's a little bit more ominous and kind of a brooding type sound. And I think it works kind of well with the themes, so I'm going to save what we've done so far, and we'll move on to the mid-range sounds and see how that kind of shakes out. I want to take Crusher's suggestion about a violin, and then maybe try and pair that with an organ or something that sounds a bit more, again, kind of like gothic in theme. And then we'll kind of piece it all together. So let's see what we can come up with. Or harpsichord. Harpsichord is also something I kind of think of when I think of like the old, like aristocratic gothic vampire imagery. So trying to pair that with something like a, beat and a composition like this might be fun. So we have a couple different options. Let's start with strings and see what we have, and then kind of piece it together. All right, let's come back for a sec. We did a lot there, so let me explain. Crusher asks, what is that stuttering thing called that you're doing? Good question. So I've learned quite a bit about the effect known as slicer. And slicer does exactly what it sounds like. It takes a sound and it cuts it up. And it cuts it up based on a specific pattern, and there's 20 different slicer patterns. The first one is just simple one note cuts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's other ones that are a more regular rhythm, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, or like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 20 different patterns. But if I run it through pattern 1 on eighth notes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, eighth notes. That's how you're getting to chop the. If I go 16th notes, it goes, and the 30-second notes would be double that. So I had it on 16s. So that's how you're getting them. And when you run it through at the track level, the slicer's doing it to everything that's currently looping, unless you disable the effect for that particular track. And so, just to illustrate, the bass line, as it's looping, as a track level effect, if we cut on the 16th note slicers, then it does that. Pretty cool track level effect, but you can also do input effects with slicer to do the same thing. So same effect on input, but let's say I take a synth line. So on the loop, it's going to be fuzzy, but for the sake of illustrating, it's fine if it's fuzzy. I'm not going to record it. If we turn on slicer with the input instead of at the track level, it goes. And so you're getting that cutting effect on the actual input, and you can record it that way. And if we take the pattern and change it, then you might be able to hear how it's actually cutting the sound differently. This is on 16th notes, but if we go pattern 1, now this is pattern 2. So it's got a pause. Pattern 3 goes 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. 4, 1, 2. It's like a less of a pause, like a rest. 5. Similar to the third one. 6. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. 7, and so on. So if we're doing like a straight rapid rhythm cut, that's why I've been using the first one. And if we go 30-second notes, which is even faster, and I've done this on some tracks, you folks will hear it in upcoming releases. I'll leave the volume there so you can hear it, but triplet version is pretty cool too. That's eighth triplets. No, quarter triplets. Ooh. That was weird. Got a little bit of feedback there. This is quarter note 1, 2, 3. And this is straight quarter notes. 1. This is breaking up the sound into single quarter notes. Pretty straightforward. Instead of, hitting it button by button manually, doing this sets that rhythm and it interrupts it and it cuts it at that interval. And for slicer, the more I try up to cut off is 70%. If we go 16s, less sharp in how it's cutting off. And max sounds like a signal beep. Same thing for the 30-second notes. And so yeah, that's Slicer. Slicer is pretty fun. You can do a lot of interesting things with it just by taking an input and then chopping it up like that. I do it for bass lines a lot. That's a good point, Crusher. Sorry. Yeah, it's cutting my mic inputs. You probably heard bits and pieces. I need to remember not to do that when I'm holding like a button down. So yeah, it was cutting up my mic. Sorry. So anyway, the effect is pretty handy for just chopping up sounds and then getting that distortion and then recording it. I've used it for bass lines. It does some neat stuff with bass lines. I'll demonstrate without talking here. So if we take like a synth bass and we add the slicer to it, it sounds like this. And I'm realizing that depending on the type of sound, that came really loud through the entire loop. So sorry if that blasted your ears. I didn't know it would do that. But let me see. Let me see if I find a better example. All right, let me try the same thing with strings, and hopefully it won't be as deafeningly loud. And so that's a really good way to set up melodies and specifically bass lines or complementing melodies with the same rhythm. And again, I'm trying not to spam it in the stuff I've been recording, but it's just so much fun to use. You can do a lot with Slicer. And so you'll hear that. All right, let's talk about the track itself. So I'll let it run in the background, but we have the bass line and the beat. And I just realized, and I don't know if I'm going to fix it now, but the first 3 notes of the bass line is exactly like one of the other tracks that I've done. It doesn't have the descending part after that, but it's which one is it? It's one of the Sakura stories, one from the Japan trip. It has that same bass line. The only difference with this one is it has the descending notes after it. So, okay, there's something we can do to change it, but it's going to be a little bit creative. Using transpose, I can actually up its key by a set amount of steps. Let me see. I do like it, but again, it's very similar to one of the other tracks I've done. I just realized that now. What if we reverse it? Nah, that doesn't work because there's a gap. It's not seamless because there's a bit of a pause when you reverse it. It puts the pause in the reverse spot, and then it sounds a little bit chopped up. Crusher says you're a little quiet. Okay. All right, how about now? Up my dynamics a little bit so I can talk. Okay. I'm having to turn my mic boost on and off and go back and forth. So if I don't turn it back up to where it was before, then it's gonna sound softer. So yeah, just let me know if you can't hear me, and I'll fix it. All right. I think I need to redo the bass. It's too similar to one of the other ones I've done. But let's look at the other parts too, because I think we can keep the other parts. So the strings. Pretty simple. Again, it's a complement to the bass line. And then the harpsichord accompaniment. Real simple several note progression that steps up a little bit and then just loops. Crusher says, love the strings. It's a violin, right? It's violin mixed with a string ensemble preset. So the violin by itself actually sounds kind of like a saxophone if you don't listen very carefully. But the combined thing, I put like a regular string ensemble with it to give it more of like a string sound, and so it's layered. The individual violin noise blends in a bit, but it sounds more like a string instead of a saxophone, so that's why I did that. Okay, so we have all the components except for the bass line, which I think I need to redo. I want to probably use the same synth bass and then maybe I'm drop the strings down a little bit so they're not quite as loud, but it still has that low end bass. If I take it and move the octave and then change the progression a little bit, then I think we'll be able to slot it in and it'll complement fine. But again, the way I have it recorded now, yeah, that first bit is exactly like one of my other songs, so I'm going to change that. So let me turn my boosts off and go fiddle around with the bass line, re-record it, and then we'll see how it kind of meshes together, and I'll save my work here. All right, so let's see what we can come up with. All right, let's come back and take a look at what we changed. Well, this one has gone places, I think, but it's interesting. I think it's an interesting combination of things coming together here. So first off, like I mentioned before, because of the bass being identical to one of the other ones, we have a new bass line. Drop the volume down a little bit so I can talk over it. So I went for more of a moving bass line that changed its kind of steps in a little bit, went up one step, and it's kind of like a weird semi-arpeggiated rhythm, which I think is a little more unique. I don't really do that a lot. But if you combine it with the beat, I think it fits. And then from there, we meshed it together with the strings. And then I don't know if I'm going to keep the harpsichord. I'm going to think about that. It's a little bit in the background, especially once you add in the rest of the high melodies. But the last thing I did, just to see how it would work, was I added a chorus synth line, kind of keeping with the idea of, like a kind of grand and like a gothic style-ish. Adding in like a sung chorus with like high-end voices is what I paired together with this last one. Simple 2-note chord progression. Let's turn up my headphones so I can hear it a little bit better. And I think it kind of blends in together fairly well. I just don't know if I'm going to have that competing with the strings, because I have them both at the same time. You kind of get competing melodies with that high end, but they're really similar notes. I think I would have them switch in and out. So instead of playing at the same time, it'd be one section with the strings, and then it drops out, and then it comes in with the chorus, and you don't have them competing. But it's kind of a neat effect, and I'm glad you're vibing with it, Crusher, because it was just a spur of the moment idea to take that chorus line and put it in. But the chorus presets on Synthesizer-kun are pretty robust. The chorus things on the Casio are a little bit less so. In fact, it sounds like this. Doesn't really sound like a choir per se. It's like a MIDI version of a choir, because it's a MIDI keyboard. But that's a cool instrument. It just doesn't sound like a sung choir. And so I'm kind of melding it all together and putting it into one kind of package. I think I don't need to record anything else right now, but as far as switch ups or like a part B to the song, having the slicer come in and chop up the melodies and the high end, but leave the bass and the rhythm alone, I think creates a pretty good contrast. Because when it chops up every single track, all 5 of them, you get kind of just a bit of a mishmash. But when you chop up just the high end and keep the low end and rhythm untouched, then it sounds like the melodies are going through kind of like a distortion filter, and then it's still, you can still hear everything in the bass. So to illustrate that, if we go, and then we turn slicer on, switch to the chorus. Almost seems like it's lagging by like a quarter beat. Yeah, I think I like with 16s, but having it switch off so that it's chopping up different parts of the high, I think works pretty well. And maybe we throw in a filter transition. I do that a lot. Maybe don't do that on this one. Just playing around with a beat scatter, but I don't think we really need to mess with that. I think having the bass song, bringing in the different parts for the accompanying high melodies, maybe switching back and forth, and throwing a slicer, like mix or switch up part towards the middle, might be an idea. We'll see. I'll keep it all on here. That way, if I decide later I want to keep it, then I don't have to reset anything. But let's go ahead and save here. Crusher asks, are you going to beatbox over this when it's complete? Probably not. Generally, when I create these recorded loops using the synthesizers and all their instrument sets, sometimes I do a mix, especially when we're doing these live. But when it's all recorded based off the instruments, I usually don't beatbox over it because sometimes it clashes with the instruments. Now, this particular beat could be a good one to rap over in the future, so that might be something I can do with it. But as far as adding more like beatboxing stuff, I generally don't do that unless there's a specific effect I want. For example, these synthesizers don't have a great series of like clap type snares, and so for one we did last time, I don't remember which one it was, but for one we did last time, I just recorded my own BGM snare to use. But I got to be careful because the sound calibration is different for beatboxing stuff versus things that are coming out of the synthesizer. So it's kind of just experimenting around and seeing what works. Okay. So I think this one is good to go now. I'm pretty happy with what we've put together. What are we going to call this one? Maybe, let me go look at my BGM track list for Halloween and see if this fits in line with any titles I have. If not, then maybe we won't include this one, and this will just be part of the regular BGM packs later. Give me 1 second to pull that doc up, and we'll see what it says. I'm not going to read out the track names because that would be spoiling the Halloween release, of course. Don't really have anything vampire themed on the list right now, but this track list is also not set in stone. I can change it and delete stuff as I feel necessary. So I guess what I'll do is I will take suggestions for what to call this one, and then I will see where it fits into the overall releases later. I can just write it down. Oh, that's what that was. That was my other keyboard turning off on its own. That's why you hear that pop. So we could play off of the idea that Lava King tossed out initially, which got us down this whole path of, like vampire jazz, you folks can tell me based on track, and I'll play it in the background. I'll just drop the volume down a bit. Based on what we've put together and what we've created, you folks can tell me if that really reflects like the idea of vampire jazz. Try to get in the ballpark, just messing around with themes and ideas. But as far as suggestions go, feel free to drop them in chat, and then we'll see what we come up with before we move on. I think what I'll do after we wrap this one up, I will jump back in the loop and I'll demo some stuff that I've been working on. And then that'll take us to the end of our time today. Let me get some water in the meantime. Looking at my track list here, there's a couple that I could probably use for a song like this. So maybe I will leave it open-ended for now. Unless anybody has any burning suggestions on what to call this one. I might sit on it for a bit and think. I have to finish working on the majority of the other tracks. There's going to be 13 of them again, and I think I've recorded maybe about 4 or 5 of them. You can also see based on any ideas that might come to me when I'm recording this thing, which is what I've done before. Maybe I can convert that harpsichord track into another instrument layer and see. Crusher says, what would be a good suggestion for a name? Well, I'll throw this out there, just for general thematic suggestion purposes. Probably nothing with the word night or dark or blood. Based on some of the stuff I'm working on, those would conflict with other titles of things that I've done. Lava King says Macabre Carnival. Macabre Carnival. Oh, that's kind of neat, Lava King. I like that. You know why I think that might actually fit is because if we take the slicer layer or the slicer effect, then it kind of invokes the idea of, not necessarily like a carnival itself, but that kind of, like you're on a ride type of feel when it starts chopping like that. That's pretty good. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do to capture this. I'm gonna take that title and I'm gonna put it on the BGM list, and then depending on how the rest of the recording stuff goes for the Halloween pack, maybe I'll move it there. If not, it'll be part of something else. Yeah, that's good. Good suggestion. Lava King says, like a haunted house ride in an amusement park. Exactly. That's a good suggestion. Very good. All right. So now, before we wrap up for today, let's go back into the loop. And what I'll do is I'll set my mic's boosts at the beginning before I even start the track so I can talk about it and I won't forget. And so you'll be able to hear me. I just have to do it every time I change to a new file. So let me, I don't even remember which one on that. Okay, we'll look at this one first. I don't remember which one this is. In fact, I don't even remember if this is from the Halloween pack, but let me play it and then we'll see what it is. I did this one a couple days ago, I think. All right, we're back. Crusher asks, is this track named already? Because I have suggestion, though it may be dumb. This one, all the ones that I'm going to be showing off, I'll do a couple of them here as part of the demonstration. They have names already because I've kind of tracked them to the list. But you could drop your suggestion, Crusher. I can always use it for something else in the future. What were you thinking about for this one? No one's going to think it's dumb. It's fine. The Horrors. You know what's funny? And this will be a bit of a spoiler. I'm not too concerned about it. It's not like I'm trying to keep some industry secrets or anything. The title for this one is called Horrify, but it's spelled differently. It's spelled like Horrify, HORRI-FI, like lo-fi, because of the lo-fi distortion and fuzz over it. So that's why it's called Horrify. So you actually were pretty close. And I think what really sold it is the phaser distortion I put on here. So if we think of, let me turn it off. The bass line has a regular kind of like string bass sound. And it does have the lo-fi in the back. That's what that kind of like ringing-ish noise is. But when I add this phaser distortion, it makes it super heavy. It makes it really aggressive, which is, I haven't decided if I'm going to keep it on for the whole time, but it creates a really menacing type of distortion overlay over the whole thing. Hence the name, Horrify. because of the distortion really affecting the low end, it doesn't affect the high end as much, but it kind of mutes it. It mutes the high synth, which this is a square lead high synth with the slicer 16th notes over it, like we talked about before. But the phaser distortion really subtly mutes the high, but it makes low end really kind of menacing, which I think is cool. I discovered that effect by accident. I don't use phaser a ton, but if you tweak some of the parameters on it, it normally creates like a laserish kind of echo. But if you change some of the parameters on the loop, then you can have it like add that whole kind of like, again, aggressive distortion over everything, which is pretty fun. And so that's Horrify. That's the only track name I'm giving you folks today. That's a sneak preview for October. But this one kind of jumped out at me because I had the track list written, and then I've been writing the tracks and recording them. And so when I do that, I just figure out what matches up to what I've written or switch stuff out if necessary. So let's look at another one. Maybe we do two more, but I'm not going to tell you what they're called. I would say, though, Crusher, since I know you hang out here with us often, if you ever have names and ideas for track BGM tracks in the future, just write them down. And then when we get together, if it fits within the vibe of what we're doing, then you can just toss it out then. Like just put it on like a notepad or something, and when we're doing these in the future, you'll have them ready. That's perfectly cool. I don't mind at all. All right, let me go back to another one. All right, this one's slower. So I don't remember what release this one is for. I guess we'll just have to play it and see. I've got Slicer saved to my third track input by default on a whole bunch of these. This one I wouldn't use that on, but it's just there from one of the previous files I copied over. Okay, so this one I think is going to be part of the Halloween pack. I have to decide. What I'll most likely do is record maybe like 20 tracks and then narrow it down to 13 that I think fit thematically. This one is simple. It's not quite as complicated as some of the other ones, but it's meant to be kind of a slow-paced, kind of lumbering track with the strings kind of playing off of the bass line, and then you have the distortion synth in here, the one that sounds like, which I think what I would have come in a little bit earlier than I did when I was just playing with the mix. But it's kind of ominous. It's not really aggressive. It's just kind of ominous and ambient. And I think if I play around with the order of the tracks as they come in, and then maybe drop some out, like maybe dropping out bass line, so you have, the melodies isolated, maybe dropping out the distortion synth too, and then having them come back in at different times would be interesting. If I just played it straight through with just all the tracks, I think it would be kind of boring. But it does, like Crusher's saying, it's meant to be kind of like an atmospheric, unsettling type sound, but not like, aggressively scary or kind of like anxiety inducing. This one kind of falls into a bit of a middle ground, I think. I do like it, but if I feel like it doesn't have enough of an atmosphere, maybe I'll switch it for another one. This one, I think I know what I would call this one, but you folks will have to wait and see, hear the name. Crusher says, I've started a list because you're horrified. It made me think of this one, and a suggestion for the type of song could go. I'll keep thinking of more. Yeah, and, by that token, when we get together to do these BGM brainstorming sessions, if you have ideas for a type of track, kind of like, Lava King tossed out the vampire jazz idea for the first one we did. If you have ideas that come to you when you're, taking a shower or walking your dog or whatever, then just write them down somewhere and then bring them to the jam streams and just toss them out as a way to kind of give us a jump off for creating these. I really try and make these streams as much about collaborating with all of you folks that are hanging out, and not just me, doing all this stuff in a vacuum. So, I tend to always ask for suggestions, and by all means, keep a list together, and when we get together and we start a new one, if something you have on your list sounds like fun, toss it out, and we'll try and work that into a track. And, if you think up a name for it too, if you think like, Angry Clouds, and then it's like a drum and bass song called Angry Clouds, then, you have all that together, and then you have the name too. Like I said, any ideas, just write them down and have them ready. Crusher says, it's in my notes app, so I won't lose it. Oh, there you go. And that could be a fun way to have ideas at the ready, and then we can just take them and run with it. I think that would be a neat exercise. I think if I ever did like a subathon, I would do something like, a subathon would be, let's do a BGM brainstorming marathon and see how many complete songs we could come up with during a subathon. That'd be a lot of work, but I think it'd be fun. Kind of like a jam session, or like a game jam thing where we get a bunch of ideas and just toss as much at the wall as possible and see what sticks, and then we can use them for releases in the future, which makes my job easier. All right, let's look at one more. Let me see if I can find the one I'm thinking of. This one will work. I just need to remember what order to put everything on here. No, this one is kind of like an alternate version of the one we just listened to. It's going to sound kind of similar. And so this one would probably be like a bonus track, or like an alt mix. It's got some unique bits to it, but it's similar to the one we just heard. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this one yet. I also don't think this one's entirely finished. It's got one empty loop track on it. So if I can find something to slot in there that's going to set this one apart from the other one, then I'll make it its own. That's what makes this one a little bit different. This one uses transpose to change the key. I don't remember what I was doing with it. Probably something like... And that's why we turn that off on the bass line. It sounds terrible. This is like 4 steps up or something like that. And it did have the slicer effect on it running in at 16th notes. I don't know if I would keep that because, again, I've done that on a couple tracks, and a couple of the ones we've talked about have that already. So maybe I will figure out something else with the effect that pairs here. Okay, so the way transpose works is ups everything by a certain step limit, like a key change, and then it just stays there unless you move the knob. That's why you can play with it in real time. So for this one, what I would do is I would set the key change and just have it ready on a button. So as soon as I hit it, it jumps up and I don't have to manually turn to it and find the key and mess around with it. It's just one change to everything. Maybe we could add a filter on this one, I don't know. And so that's this particular track in a nutshell. I forgot about the transpose. The transpose does set it apart enough, I think. If I can think of another 4th track instrument to add in here that'll kind of boost the sound, then I'll do that before I record it eventually. But it's the bass line that sounds similar, so maybe I will tie it title-wise to something similar like the other one. We'll see. I think it's the strings that I like the most on this one. It definitely has kind of like that horror serial killerish vibe with the way they have that. It has that constant rhythm. Crusher says, what about a flute or some kind of woodwind? Yeah. Let's see what we have. There are things like a flute or like I don't know about a wood, like a pan flute. That would give kind of more of a kind of wood echoey sound. I don't think that's necessarily the vibe here, but maybe something that's a little bit higher pitched, like an ocarina with an effect on it. Like if you put like a delay or like an echoey effect on an ocarina so instead of just sounding like a flute, it sounds more like a ghostly flute. Let me see if I can illustrate what I'm talking about here. That was a recorder. Sorry, that was a recorder, not what I wanted. Nope, that's not the effect I wanted either. What I'm trying to do is add kind of like a delayed repeating effect to the flute so it sounds like it's echoing. Drop the volume down a little bit so I can talk over this easier. Crusher asks, is a piccolo similar to an ocarina? Piccolo is like a higher, sharper register flute. So it's going to sound a bit more metallic. For example, piccolo sounds like this. It sounds a little bit more metallic-y sounding, and ocarina sounds more like a softer, kind of hard to describe, more muted sound for an ocarina. You could try and add like a filter effect over a piccolo. That'll give it a really weird sound. Especially if we use this particular filter noise. I have it set. This filter set a certain way, so it sounds like a signal repeater. That's the way it works for that one. But if we use a different filter, it would kind of muffle the piccolo flute noise and give it kind of like a warbly noise to it. I think personally, I would go with an ocarina, but I'm trying to find the right combination of effects that would give it kind of a more unique sound. Let me see what else I got here. This is flanger, which again, it gives it kind of like a laser echoey type sound. That's not bad. I'll have to think about that. I like the idea of doing like a distorted wind instrument on that track to kind of complement everything. Carter says, what about a theremin, or however you spell it? Theremin, yeah, that thing that sounds like. That might actually be somewhere on on Synthesizer-kun. I think it has a theremin. I just don't know where it is. Yeah, that thing is interesting. I could probably duplicate the sound of a theremin by putting some effects on an instrument like a flute. I just don't readily know what I would use. Another thing is going to be hard to do is I got to reach a little bit, but this particular synth has essentially it's a whammy bar on it, so I can do something like this. Problem with trying to record a loop is I have to have two hands to be able to do that. and I can't like start and stop the loop without taking my hand off of one thing on there, but it does have a ability to warble the pitch like that, which is kind of fun. So anyway, yeah, that's this particular one. I'd say might need a little bit more polishing to get done, but the general vibe is there. Very kind of ominous and ambient sounding. But still plenty more work to be done. I think once we get through the release coming up next week, I think I'm going to be putting together BGM 3.0 for like a late summer release, and then that'll be it until October. We'll just have to see, since I've got a bunch of tracks that you folks have helped me create, kind of ready to go, and a few more to record for BGM 3.0. And so a bunch of the ones that have been created over the last year and change are all going to go in there. And there's some stuff in there that goes way back, but that will be coming soon. But I think we will go ahead and call that a stream. Lava King says you're going to use the Carnival title. Yeah, that title will go with that track wherever I put it. Whether it's in the Halloween pack or if I put it in the BGM pack, that one is going to be called Macabre Carnival. So I can't tell you where or when yet, because I'm not finished planning out all the songs, but that one will show up in a collection at some point. So you can tell all your friends that you're the one who named that one. This was a good suggestion, like Crusher's saying. But let's see. Let me go check and see if anyone is online to raid. We're a little bit early for a Sunday afternoon. Let's see. Check my master list here. Yeah, I did see Lib is live. They're on my list of people too. We can go and raid Lib. See that I think they're doing just chatting. And go say what's up to fellow artist. So let me go ahead and go to outro. And cue this up real quick while we're getting everything squared away here. Good to go. So thanks again for everyone who came in and hung out. I think it was productive. We got some stuff accomplished today, which is great. I will figure out the stream schedule for next week. And again, album release party sometime next week, probably Thursday. I will lock it in with Annie, and we will get that on the schedule. So it should be fun. Until then, hope everyone has a good evening. Now let's go see what Lib's up to.